My name is Emily Carter, and I'm 29 years old. I was born in Ohio, but this story really starts the day I packed my whole life into 2 suitcases, moved from Cleveland to Denver, got the biggest promotion of my career, and not a single person in my family even noticed. Not my mom, not my dad, not my older sister Hannah, not my cousins who live on their phones 24/7. It was like I stopped existing the moment I left my parents' driveway. For a whole year, I built a new life in Colorado. I went from a cramped shared apartment to a sunny 2-bedroom condo with mountain views. I went from the backup employee at a small accounting firm to senior financial analyst at a healthcare company, with my own office, my name on the door, and a salary that made my old paychecks look like tips. And still, from my family? Silence. No, how are you? No, did you get there safe? Not even a lazy happy birthday text. Then one random Sunday, my cousin posted a group selfie in my living room, in my condo, with my furniture and my art on the walls. I wasn't even in the picture because I was the one taking it. The caption said, "Visiting my girl in Denver, so proud of her place." An hour later, my mom texted me for the first time in 3 months. Not to ask how I was, not to say she missed me. Just one line. "You know, you could sell that condo to help your sister." That was the moment everything snapped inside me. That was also the moment I decided if my parents thought I didn't exist, I was going to send them something they could not ignore. A bill. I grew up in a small town outside Cleveland, in a blue house with peeling paint and a yard my dad swore he'd fix next summer every year for 15 years. My dad, Mark, was a mechanic who always smelled like motor oil and coffee. My mom, Linda, worked part-time at a dentist's office and full-time managing my sister's life. Hannah, my older sister by 3 years, was the star. Straight A student, cheerleader, student council, always on the honor roll wall. Teachers knew her name before she walked into a class. Whenever I introduced myself, people would say, "Oh, you're Hannah's sister." I was never just Emily. At home, it was even worse. Every dinner was about Hannah's tests, Hannah's teachers, Hannah's future. If I tried to talk about something small that made me happy, like a drawing I did or a story I wrote, my mom would smile vaguely and say, "That's nice, honey," then go right back to, "So Hannah, what did Mrs. Peterson say about your college essays?" My dad loved us both, I guess, but he showed it in very different ways. For Hannah, he went to every game and every award ceremony, filmed her on his old camcorder, and bragged about her to anyone who would listen. For me, he'd pat my shoulder and say, "You're quiet, Em. That's okay. Not everyone needs to be a superstar." I learned very early that if I made myself small and didn't need anything, things were calmer at home. No one yelled, no one sighed, no one said I was being dramatic. So I got good at being invisible, good at fading into the background like I was part of the furniture. But as I got older, that quiet girl turned into something else in their eyes. I became the one they didn't bother to ask about, didn't bother to check on, didn't bother to invest in, because all the family resources went to the one with potential, and that was never me. The moment I really understood my place in the Carter family came when I was 17 and Hannah was 20. She had just finished her second year at Ohio State, and she was already talking about law school. That summer, she came home waving a letter that said she'd been accepted into some fancy pre-law summer program in New York. The tuition was almost $5,000, plus flights, plus housing. My parents sat at the kitchen table with a calculator, muttering and scribbling on a notepad while I did the dishes. I heard my mom say, "We can put part of it on the credit card, then maybe your dad can pick up extra shifts." My dad sighed and said, "We'll make it work. This is Hannah's future." I remember wiping a plate and saying quietly, "I was hoping to take a drawing class at the community college this summer." It was $200. I had already saved $50 from babysitting. My mom didn't even look up from the calculator. "Emily, we can't do everything. You know money is tight. Besides, art is a hobby, not a career, sweetie." Dad added, "Maybe next summer, kiddo." Next summer never came. That night, Hannah bounced around the house, showing me the program website, the New York skyline, the photos of students in suits. "Isn't this amazing?" she said. "This is like my dream." I smiled and said, "Yeah, it is." Then I went into my room and closed the door. I pulled out my sketchbook and stared at the blank page. I didn't feel jealous that she had a dream. I felt crushed that mine didn't matter at all. That was the first time I thought, I am the backup plan, the extra kid, the one they'll get to if there's money or energy left, which there never is. From that day, I stopped asking for things. No more classes, no more rides to clubs, no more help with anything. I got a job at the grocery store and told myself I'd figure things out alone. I told myself one day I'd leave and nobody would even notice I was gone. By the time I graduated high school, I was used to being invisible, but I still hoped that maybe, just maybe, my graduation day would be different. Hannah was finishing college that same week, and my parents had driven down to Columbus for her ceremony. They sent pictures of her in a cap and gown, my mom hugging her, my dad holding balloons. The caption said, "So proud of our girl," and "Our future lawyer." My ceremony was 3 days later back home. When I reminded my parents about the date, my mom hesitated. "Oh, Em, that's the same day Hannah is getting an award at the law school banquet. We can't be in 2 places at once." I swallowed. "You could come to mine in the morning and drive back?" My dad rubbed his neck. "It's a long drive, kiddo, and gas is expensive. Your grandma can go, right? We'll be there in spirit. We know you'll do great." So on my graduation day, I walked across the football field in a wrinkled blue gown, my name was called, and I took my diploma only to look up at the bleachers and see one person waving, my grandmother sitting alone with a tiny bouquet she had bought herself. After the ceremony, she pulled me aside and put the flowers in my hands. "Emily, I am so proud of you," she said, her voice firm. "Don't you ever forget that, even if other people do." I forced a smile and pretended it didn't hurt that my own parents couldn't be bothered to show up. That night, I saw a picture on Facebook of my family, all dressed up at some fancy hall in Columbus, with Hannah in the middle holding a plaque. The caption from my mom said, "So honored to watch Hannah receive her award. This is what hard work looks like." There was no post about my graduation, no picture, no mention that their younger daughter had finished high school at all. I told myself it was fine. I told myself it was normal. But deep down, a thought started to grow. If they can't even show up for my graduation, what makes me think they'll ever show up for my life? After high school, there was never any real talk about me going away to college. For Hannah, the rule had been clear: 4-year university, big-name school, whatever it takes. For me, my mom just said, "Community college is fine for you, Em. You're not as academic as your sister, and we can't afford 2 big tuitions." I enrolled at the local community college and chose accounting because it sounded practical, and nobody laughed when I said it out loud. My grandmother helped me fill out the forms. My parents barely glanced at them, while Hannah got care packages, dorm furniture, and tearful goodbyes when she left. I got a map for the bus route and a reminder to clock in at my part-time job at the grocery store on weekends. For 2 years, I woke up early, took a 45-minute bus ride to campus, sat in classes, then rushed straight to work to bag groceries until 9 at night. I studied at the kitchen table while my parents watched TV. Sometimes my mom would sigh and say, "You're always so busy, Emily. No wonder you never help around the house," even though I did most of the laundry and dishes. When I finished my associate degree with honors, the college held a small ceremony. I didn't bother inviting my parents. I knew they'd be too tired or too busy supporting Hannah's next step. Instead, my grandmother came again, just like she had at my high school graduation. She gave me a small card with $50 in it and wrote, "For your first step out of here." It was the only time I let myself think, maybe I really can get out. Maybe my life doesn't have to be work, bus, sleep, repeat. But when I tried to talk to my parents about transferring to a university in another state, my dad shut it down fast. Out-of-state tuition is ridiculous, Em. You can finish your degree here and live at home. It's cheaper. You know we can't help you with money like we did with your sister. We're still paying off her loans." That was the night I realized my life was always going to be built around whatever Hannah needed. Not because she asked for it, but because my parents decided she was the one worth sacrificing for. I was just expected to be grateful for whatever scraps were left. Eventually, I transferred to a state university not far from home. I lived in a tiny off-campus place with 2 roommates and worked nights at a diner. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. While Hannah went to law school and posted pictures of city skylines and expensive coffee, I posted nothing. I had learned that any time I shared a small win, it got buried under comments like, "Have you seen what Hannah is doing? She's killing it." After I graduated with my bachelor's in accounting, I got my first real job at a local firm. It wasn't huge, and the pay wasn't great, but I had benefits and vacation days and a badge with my picture on it. I remember calling my mom that afternoon, sitting in my car in the parking lot. "Mom, I got the job," I said, smiling so hard my cheeks hurt. "Full-time, with benefits." There was a pause. Then she said, "That's great, honey. Hold on, your sister's calling me. We'll talk later, okay?" She hung up before I could say anything else. Later that night, my dad texted, "Heard about the job. Good for you." He also added a link to some article about the cost of living and how I should be careful with money. I read the text 3 times and thought about how they had thrown parties for Hannah's milestones. For mine, I got a half-distracted "good for you" and a warning to budget. At work, my boss, a woman named Karen, actually took time to train me. She noticed I was good with numbers and patterns, that I caught mistakes other people missed. She said, "You're sharp, Emily. You should think about moving up fast." It was the first time an adult told me I was good at something without following it with a but. It planted an idea in my head. Maybe my value didn't depend on what my parents saw. Maybe I could build something where their opinion wasn't the main thing that mattered. Still, every holiday, every family gathering, whenever someone asked my mom, "How are the girls?" she would light up about Hannah's grades, Hannah's internships, Hannah's law school. If someone asked about me, she'd say, "Oh, Emily's working at some accounting place. She's fine." I was the footnote in my own life story. The turning point came 2 years into that first job. I was 26, stuck in the same small town, doing decent work for low pay, and slowly suffocating under the feeling that nothing was ever going to change. One day, my boss called me into her office. She shut the door and said, "Emily, I'm going to be honest. You're too good for this place. You should be somewhere bigger, somewhere that pays you what you're worth." I laughed it off at first, but she was serious. She forwarded me a job posting at a large healthcare company in Denver. They were looking for someone with my exact background, and the salary range was almost double what I was making. For a week, I stared at that posting. I kept thinking about my grandmother's card from years ago. "For your first step out of here." Out of here had always sounded like a fantasy, a word for other people. But now there was an actual city, an actual job, an actual number on a screen that could change my life. I didn't tell my parents I applied. I updated my resume, wrote the best cover letter of my life, and sent it off at midnight with my heart pounding like I was confessing a crime. A month later, after a phone interview and a video call, they flew me out to Colorado for an in-person interview. When I stepped off the plane and saw the mountains in the distance, something inside me loosened. The air felt different, the sky felt bigger. The interview went better than I could have dreamed. They offered me the job a week later. When I called my mom to tell her, she said, "Denver? That's so far. Why would you go all the way there when you have family here?" I said, "Because there's nothing for me here except a job that pays me $12 an hour less." My dad chimed in from the background, "You're overreacting, Em. People don't just move across the country like that. It's risky." I realized in that moment that they weren't worried about me. They were worried about losing the extra quiet kid who always adjusted around everyone else. They were worried about what would happen when I stopped fitting into the box they built for me. So I did something they never thought I would. I signed the offer. I set a date. and I booked a one-way ticket to Denver. Moving from Ohio to Colorado should have felt like a big family moment. Boxes, goodbye dinners, maybe a party. For Hannah, when she moved to another city for law school, there were tears, speeches, and a whole caravan of cars. For me, there was just me, my old Toyota, and 2 suitcases. The night before I left, my parents didn't plan anything. We ate leftover pizza in front of the TV and watched some crime show. Finally, around 10, my mom said, "So you're really going, huh?" I said, "Yeah, my flight is at 9 in the morning." She nodded and stared at the screen again. My dad just said, "Drive safe to the airport." No hug, no, "We're proud of you." Nothing. Hannah, who was living in another city by then, sent a text that said, "Good luck out there, Em. Call if you need anything." It felt polite, not loving. The next morning, I loaded my suitcases into a rideshare and stood in the doorway for a second, waiting for someone to say something. My mom waved from the kitchen. "Send us your new address," she called. My dad didn't get up from his chair. That was it. That was my big goodbye. At the airport, I sat at the gate and tried not to cry. I wasn't sad about leaving the house or the town. I was grieving the idea of parents who might chase me to the car, hug me too long, and tell me they believed in me. Those parents didn't exist. On the plane, I put my headphones on and watched the ground fall away beneath me. I promised myself something as the clouds swallowed Ohio. In Denver, I will not be the backup kid. In Denver, I will be the main character in my own life. My parents didn't text to ask if I landed safely. My grandma did. "Did you arrive? Are the mountains as pretty as they say?" she wrote. I sent her a picture from the Airbnb where I stayed that first week, a tiny place with a view of downtown. "It's beautiful," I replied. For the first time in a long time, I believed it could be beautiful for me too. My new job in Denver was like stepping onto a different planet. The office was modern, bright, and full of people my age who actually liked their work. On my first day, my manager, a man named Carlos, walked me around and introduced me as our new financial rock star from Ohio. Nobody had ever used a word like rock star about me before. My role was senior financial analyst for a healthcare network with hospitals all over the state. Instead of just punching numbers into spreadsheets, I got to analyze budgets, help plan new projects, and sit in meetings where decisions were made. I noticed patterns, just like I had at my old job, but here, when I pointed them out, people listened. I remember one meeting where a group was struggling with a cost problem on a new clinic. I hesitantly suggested a different way to structure the budget. The room went quiet. Then Carlos said, "That's actually a really smart idea. Let's model that." 2 weeks later, that model became the plan they used. It saved the company hundreds of thousands of dollars. They gave me a bonus. At lunch, my coworkers invited me out for tacos, asked me about my life, my hobbies, what brought me to Denver. Nobody compared me to Hannah. Nobody made me feel like I was filler in someone else's story. On weekends, I walked around the city, found a park I liked, tried new coffee shops, and started sketching again. For the first time since high school, I bought a new sketchbook. At night, I'd sit by the window, looking at the mountains, drawing buildings, trees, people. When I sent pictures to my grandma, she replied, "You sound happy. I can hear it between the words." My parents, meanwhile, hardly reached out. Weeks would go by with nothing. If I texted, my mom would respond with a thumbs up or, "Busy, talk later." They never once asked how the new job was going. They never asked what Denver was like. It hurt, but it also freed something in me. If they weren't going to be part of my story, I didn't have to live for their approval anymore. After a year at the company, my promotion came. Carlos called me into his office and said, "Emily, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. You've earned this. We're moving you up to lead analyst with a salary increase and housing support if you're interested in buying." I stared at him. "Buying what?" He smiled. "Property, a condo, a small house. We have partnerships with a few lenders. You're in a strong position financially now." The idea of owning anything felt unreal. But when I looked at my bank account, my savings, and the numbers he showed me, I realized he was right. I started condo hunting with a real estate agent. We looked at dozens of places, but the one that stuck with me was a 2-bedroom condo on the edge of downtown with big windows and a tiny balcony you could stand on and see both the skyline and a hint of mountain beyond the buildings. The price made my heart race, but my numbers brain calculated the mortgage, my salary, and my savings. It was tight but possible. I closed on the condo 6 months later. On the day I got the keys, I stood in the middle of the empty living room and turned in a slow circle. "This is mine," I whispered. "Not rented, not borrowed, not my parents'. Mine." I took a picture of the bare room and sent it to my grandma with the caption, "I did it." She called me crying and said, "I knew you would, Em." I didn't tell my parents right away. Part of me wanted to wait and surprise them. Part of me was afraid they'd find a way to make it about Hannah again. 2 weeks later, during a short call, I casually mentioned, "I bought a condo." My mom barely reacted. "Wow, that's fast. Make sure you don't overextend yourself. Anyway, your sister just got invited to a big networking event." The rest of the call was about Hannah. My dad didn't text to say congratulations. He didn't ask for pictures. They treated my biggest adult milestone like it was nothing, like I had told them I bought a new pair of shoes. I told myself I didn't care. But at night, when I sat on my secondhand couch and looked around at my new place, part of me wished someone from my family would call just to say, "We're proud of you." Instead, the only person who consistently texted about my life was my grandmother in Ohio and a few friends in Denver who had started to feel more like family than my actual relatives. Over the next year, my life in Denver deepened. I made friends. I found a favorite grocery store and a favorite sandwich spot. I learned which side of the street got shade in the afternoon. At work, I kept taking on more responsibility. People in other departments started asking for Emily from finance when they needed help. At home, I decorated my condo slowly, piece by piece. I framed one of my drawings and hung it over the couch. I bought plants and tried not to kill them. Sometimes I'd stop in the doorway after a long day and just breathe in the quiet, reminding myself, I built this. In Ohio, life went on without me. Hannah finished law school and started working at a firm. My parents posted every step of her journey on Facebook. New job, first day, first big case, her new apartment in a nice area. Whenever I opened social media, I saw their proud faces, their long captions about her work ethic, and how they always knew she'd be someone. I wasn't mentioned. There were no posts about our daughter crushing it in Colorado or so proud of Emily for buying a place of her own. If someone looked at my parents' online lives, they would think they only had one child. Phone calls became shorter and rarer. Holidays were the worst. On Thanksgiving, I worked a volunteer shift at a shelter serving food. When I called my mom later, the house was loud with relatives. She put me on speaker and said, "Say hi to Emily, everyone." There was a chorus of hi and "How's Denver?" before the conversation turned back to a football game in the background. No one asked for details. No one asked if I was alone. Christmas, they didn't invite me. When I asked my mom about it, she said, "Oh, honey, I thought flights would be too expensive for you. We didn't want you to feel pressured." I looked at my calendar, my PTO, and my bank account. I could have gone. I realized they hadn't bothered to check. They didn't ask what my schedule was or what I could afford. They just assumed I'd be fine on my own. Like always, like the extra kid who could be put on a shelf and taken down when convenient. That winter, sitting by my small fake tree in the condo with one string of lights, I finally admitted it to myself. My parents forgot I existed unless I made myself impossible to ignore. My cousin Megan and I had always been close growing up. She wasn't like the rest of the family. She remembered my birthdays, she asked about my art, she talked to me like I had a brain that mattered. So when she texted, "I have a work conference in Denver. Can I crash with you for a couple nights?" I said yes, without thinking. When she arrived, she walked into my condo and stopped just inside the door. "Emily, this place is gorgeous," she said, spinning slowly. This is all you?" I laughed, embarrassed and proud at the same time. "Yeah, all me. No parents, no roommates, no one else." She hugged me and said, "I'm so proud of you, you know that?" The first night we ordered pizza, drank cheap wine on the balcony, and talked about everything. She asked real questions about my job, my coworkers, my goals. I told her how I'd been handling budgets for entire clinics, how my manager had hinted at another promotion down the line. Megan listened like it was the most interesting thing in the world. At one point, she said, "Your mom never talks about this. She just says, 'Emily's doing fine out there. I had no idea you were killing it like this.'" The words stung, but I just shrugged. "They're busy. Hannah's big." Megan rolled her eyes. "You're big too, Em. They just don't see it." The next day, after she went to her conference, she came back excited and said, "Let's take a selfie in your living room. I want to post how cool my cousin is." We stood in front of the big window, sunlight pouring in, and took a photo, her grinning, me holding up a coffee mug, plants and framed art behind us. She posted it with the caption, "Visiting my badass cousin in Denver. She bought her own condo and is absolutely thriving. So proud." I smiled when I read it. It felt like someone finally said out loud what I'd been quietly building. I didn't know that one picture would blow up my entire relationship with my parents within hours. The photo went up around noon on a Sunday. By 1 o'clock, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my mom, the first direct message I'd gotten from her in weeks. It said, "Megan posted a picture. Is that where you live?" I replied, "Yeah, that's my condo." A minute later, her next message arrived. "That place looks nice. You know, you could sell it to help your sister." I stared at the screen. My jaw actually dropped. "No, wow, it's beautiful. No, we had no idea you bought a place. No, we're proud of you for doing this on your own." Just a suggestion that I should sell my home to bail out Hannah, who, from what I knew, was having some credit card and car loan issues. My fingers trembled as I typed back, "Excuse me?" She replied, "Hannah is really stressed. The law firm cut her bonus and she's behind on some payments. Your dad and I are tapped out after helping her with school. You always managed on your own. We thought maybe you could downsize, get something smaller, and use the extra to help your sister get back on track." I felt something in me go very, very still. Years of being the afterthought, the backup, the quiet one, all boiled up at once. I wasn't even a person to them in this text. I was an asset, an emergency fund with a face. She literally saw my condo, the thing I had worked so hard for, as a piggy bank for Hannah's mistakes. I typed, "You're asking me to sell my home so Hannah doesn't have to adjust her lifestyle?" My mom replied, "Don't be dramatic, Emily. Family helps family. You don't have kids or a husband. You're fine. Hannah has a lot more pressure." That was it. That "you're fine" broke me more than anything. For my parents, I was always fine. Fine meant doesn't need us. Fine meant we don't have to make an effort. Fine meant we can keep taking from you without ever giving anything back. Right then, on my own couch, in my own living room that they had never stepped foot in, I decided something. If they wanted to treat me like a walking bank account, then I was going to show them the numbers in a way they'd never forget. I didn't reply to my mom right away. I set my phone down, took a long shower, and let the anger run through me. By the time I stepped out, I wasn't just angry. I was clear. My whole life, my parents had kept a mental scorecard where Hannah's needs always came first, and mine didn't even appear. They acted like I was low maintenance because I never asked for anything, when the truth was, every time I asked, they said no or brushed me aside. So I decided to send them my scorecard. The real one. I sat down at my desk, opened my laptop, and created a spreadsheet. If you're thinking, "Wow, that's dramatic," you're right. It was. But it was also the language my parents understood. Money. I started with all the big things I had paid for myself since I turned 18. Community college tuition, books, bus passes, rent, utilities, groceries. Then I added the money I'd lent them over the years, like the time they asked for $500, just until payday, and dragged the payback for 10 months, then forgot the last 100. I listed the car repairs I paid entirely myself because your dad is too busy and we can't help right now. I also added the one time they had actually promised help with a security deposit and backed out at the last second because Hannah had an unexpected expense. I wasn't trying to be petty. I was trying to show a pattern. For every line, I wrote the year, the reason, the amount. I totaled it. The number was just over $14,000. $14,000 I had used to survive, to build myself, without a penny of help from them after Hannah started college, while they poured every last cent and bit of energy into her path. $14,000 I had never asked them to repay, because at the time, I told myself, that's what adults do. They take care of themselves. Then I wrote a letter. Not a messy, emotional rant. A clear, calm message. I started with, since you're asking me to sell my home to help Hannah, I think it's only fair to first settle the balance of what I've already covered on my own without support. This is the bill for the daughter you forgot. Under that, I attached the spreadsheet. At the bottom, I wrote, total, $14,327.18. Once this is paid, we can talk about whether I'm willing to sacrifice my home for my sister's financial comfort. I reread it 3 times, making sure it was firm but not cruel. Then I emailed it to both of them and CC'd Hannah. The subject line? Invoice from the daughter who always managed on her own. The reaction was faster than I expected. 10 minutes after I hit send, my phone started buzzing. First it was my mom, then my dad, then Hannah, then my mom again. I let it ring. I wanted them to sit with that email for a bit. Finally, I picked up when my dad called a 3rd time. He didn't even say hello. He went straight into, "What the hell is this, Emily?" I kept my voice calm. It's the total of what I've had to cover alone while you focused on Hannah. It's the money you never even offered to help with. If you want me to give up my home, I want you to understand what that really means, considering you never supported me the way you did her. He barked a bitter laugh. This is insane. Parents don't pay their kids back for living expenses. That's not how it works. I said, parents also don't ask one child to sell their home to clean up the other child's mess. That's not how it works either. My mom came on the line, her voice high and tight. Emily, this is so hurtful. We did what we could. Hannah's education was an investment in the whole family. You never needed as much. You were always the independent one. There it was again. My independence turned into an excuse to neglect me. I replied, I wasn't independent. I was forced to be, because every time I needed something, you said there wasn't enough. Somehow, there was always enough for her. Study programs, dorm furniture, trips, networking events. But when I asked for a $200 class, you said no. When I moved across the country, you barely said goodbye. Now that you see I built a life, suddenly you remember I exist because I have something you want. There was silence on the line. My mom whispered, "It's not like that." I said, "It is exactly like that. The spreadsheet is just the money. It doesn't even cover the birthdays you forgot, the graduations you skipped, the calls you didn't make." That's when Hannah joined the call, furious. "Em, this is ridiculous. I didn't ask them to do all that for me. It's not my fault they made different choices with us." I took a breath. "You're right. It's not your fault what they did. But it is your fault if you stand there and let them guilt me into giving up my home for your mistakes." She snapped, "They're not mistakes. They're circumstances. Law is expensive. I'm under a lot of pressure." I said, "We're all under pressure. I just learned to carry mine without asking anyone else to bleed for me." Then I added, "I'm not selling my condo. I'm not paying your bills. The only way I'm giving up anything is if Mom and Dad actually pay me back for the years they pretended I didn't need them." My dad shouted, "We are your parents. You owe us respect." I answered, "Respect goes both ways, and sending your forgotten daughter an itemized bill is the most respectful thing I've done in this family in years, because at least it's honest." Then I hung up. For the next week, there was total silence. No calls, no texts, no emails. I thought maybe they were cooling off. In reality, they were plotting. I didn't know it yet, but they were calling relatives, telling their version of the story, that I had attacked them with an invoice, that I was selfish and ungrateful after everything they'd done for me. People started reaching out. My aunt messaged me on Facebook saying, "I heard you asked your parents for money back. They're heartbroken, Emily. Parents aren't perfect. You need to forgive." I replied, "Did they tell you they asked me to sell my home to bail out Hannah?" She didn't answer. Another cousin texted, "You know your mom cried all night after that email?" I stared at that message, and for the first time, I didn't feel guilty. My mom had cried. I had cried for years, alone. On my bed after graduations they missed, after calls they ignored, after posts where I didn't exist. I decided I wasn't going to be the family scapegoat this time. A few days later, my grandma called. Her voice was calm but heavy. "Emily, your parents told me there was a situation." I sighed and said, "Did they tell you the whole situation?" She said, "No, so why don't you?" I told her everything. The years of being second place, the move, the condo, the text, the bill. I expected her to tell me I'd gone too far. Instead, she said, "I've watched this for a long time, honey. I've watched them pour water into one plant and leave you in the shade, then act surprised when you grew sideways instead of straight. I'm not mad at you. I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself." My throat tightened. "But the bill," she interrupted. "The bill was you saying, 'I exist, and I remember.' Sometimes you have to put numbers on things for people who only understand numbers." She paused, then added, "Don't let them shame you back into being small." After that call, something in me settled. If the only person in my family who had ever shown up for me wasn't mad, I could live with the rest of them being uncomfortable. About 2 weeks after the invoice email, my parents finally called again. This time my mom's voice was different, tired, smaller. "Emily, can we talk?" she asked. I said yes, but I braced myself. She started with, "We've been thinking about what you wrote." My dad was on speaker too. He cleared his throat and said, "We never meant for you to feel forgotten." The way he said it, like the word tasted strange in his mouth, almost made me laugh. Almost. I said, "But I did feel forgotten. For years. That's the point." My mom said, "We did what we thought was right. Hannah always seemed like she needed more. You were quiet. We thought you were okay." I replied, "I wasn't okay. I just learned not to bother you with my needs, because every time I did, I heard some version of 'we can't' or 'maybe later,' while Hannah got immediate support." My dad tried a different tactic. "We're from a different generation, Em. We didn't realize how this looked. We thought we were investing in the child with the highest chance of return." He trailed off. Return. There it was. I'd always suspected it, but hearing it out loud stung. I said, "So you saw Hannah as a stock and me as what? A savings account that didn't need deposits?" My mom rushed in. No, that's not what he meant. We thought you didn't want much. You never made a fuss." I said, "I learned not to make a fuss because it never mattered when I did." They tried the guilt angle next. "Do you really want to keep this anger forever?" my mom asked. "Family is all we have at the end." I thought about my condo, my coworkers, my friends in Denver who had become my support system, and my grandmother on the phone reminding me not to shrink. I said, "Family is supposed to feel like a safety net, not a hole you fall through. Right now, my friends, my job, my own four walls, that feels more like family than you do." My dad muttered, "We messed up, okay?" He sounded more irritated than sorry. "But that invoice was over the line." I said, "Maybe it was, but so was asking me to sell my home for a sister who's never once called to ask how my life is going." There was a long silence. Finally, my mom said, "What do you want from us?" It was the first honest question they had asked me in years. When my mom asked what I wanted from them, I realized I had two choices. I could blow up the relationship for good, block their numbers, and move on, or I could set terms, real ones, Not those soft boundaries I used to have, the ones they crossed without even noticing. So I took a breath and said, "Here's what I want. First, I want you to stop acting like Hannah is the only child you have. If someone asks how your daughters are, I want you to mention me too. Second, I want you to stop using me as the strong one who doesn't need anything just because I learned how to survive on my own." My dad said, "Fine, what else?" He sounded impatient, but I didn't let that throw me off. "Third, I want you to understand, I am not an emergency fund for this family. My condo, my savings, my job, those are mine. I worked for them. I will help if I choose to, not because I'm bullied or shamed into it." My mom whispered, "We just want everyone to be okay." I said, "Then tell Hannah no sometimes. Tell her she needs to adjust. Tell her she can't keep spending like she has a billionaire behind her." Hannah, who had been quietly listening on the line, finally spoke up. "So that's it? You're just going to let your sister drown?" I answered, "No, I'm going to let her learn how to swim." I knew it sounded harsh, but it was true. I had to figure out bus schedules and double shifts and financial aid on my own while you were in New York programs and fancy schools. I'm not going to erase all that just because you don't like how adulthood feels. Then I said something that surprised even me. "As for the invoice, I don't actually expect you to pay it." My dad scoffed. "Good, because we can't." I continued, "But I want you to sit with that number, $14,000. That's not me asking for cash. That's a picture of what it cost me to be the daughter you forgot to invest in. That's my proof I didn't have it easy." My mom sniffled. "We can't go back in time." I said, "No, you can't. But you can choose how you treat me going forward." I gave them one last term. "If you ever ask me again to sacrifice my stability to rescue someone else, I'm done. No more calls, no more visits. That's not a threat. It's just a line I'm drawing to protect myself." They didn't like that, but they didn't argue either, because for the first time, they understood I meant it. Things didn't magically get better overnight. This isn't a fairy tale. It's real life. For a while, things were awkward. Calls were stiff, full of small talk and long pauses. But slowly, very slowly, some things started to shift. My mom began asking real questions. "How's work?" Not in a vague way, but actually listening to the answer. When I told her I led a new project, she said, "That sounds important," and didn't immediately change the subject to Hannah. My dad took longer. He's stubborn, set in his ways. But one day, out of the blue, he called me on a Tuesday. "Heard there was a snowstorm in Colorado," he said. "You okay over there?" It was a small thing, but it mattered. He was watching the news and thought of me. Not as the backup kid, just as his kid. Hannah and I had our own reckoning. She called a few weeks after that big call and said, "I'm redoing my budget. My therapist said I lean on our parents too much." I guess I leaned on you too, without even realizing it. I appreciated the honesty, even if it came late. I said, "I don't hate you, Hannah. I just refuse to be the one who pays for everybody's choices while nobody even says thank you." She was quiet for a moment, then said, "I get it. I'm trying to grow up, I guess." We weren't close overnight, but we started texting more, not just about her work, but about stupid memes and TV shows. She even asked me for advice on organizing her finances. I helped her build a spreadsheet. I didn't do it for her. I did it with her. My grandma, of course, remained my biggest supporter. She sent me a card that said, "Proud of you for finally sending that bill. You were always worth more than they could see." I framed that card and put it in my home office. Whenever I felt guilty, I looked at it and reminded myself, I had not burned my family down. I had lit a match in a dark room, and everyone was just now getting used to the light. Almost a year after the "you could sell it" text, my parents came to Denver for the first time. Not to vacation, not for some event, but to see me. For months, my mom had said, "We should come see your place," and I'd always say, "You're welcome anytime," assuming they'd never actually make the effort. But this time, they booked flights, sent me the confirmation, and said, "We'll be there Friday." When I picked them up at the airport, my mom hugged me longer than usual. My dad patted my back like he didn't quite know what to do with his hands. On the drive to my condo, my mom kept looking out the window saying, "It's so pretty here." My dad kept asking questions about my car, my job, my route. When we pulled into my building's parking garage and rode the elevator up, my heart was pounding. This was the test. Were they going to treat my home like something expendable, or were they finally going to see it like I did, a symbol of everything I had built on my own? I opened the door and let them walk in first. My mom stopped in the middle of the living room, just like Megan had months earlier. "Oh," she said softly, "Emily, this is beautiful." My dad walked over to the window, looked out at the view, and nodded. "Nice place, really nice." Only 2 words, but from him, that was a speech. I gave them the tour. The kitchen I had saved for, the second bedroom I turned into an office and art space, the balcony where I drank my morning coffee. They asked questions, not about how much I could get if I sold it, but about what plants I grew, what time the sun hit the windows, how long my commute was. That night, after they went to bed on the pull-out couch, my mom stayed up with me in the kitchen, nursing a cup of tea. "I owe you an apology," she said. "For what?" I asked, even though I knew. "For that text, for asking you to give this up. I see now what this place means to you. I think I just panicked when I saw Megan's picture. I realized how much of your life I've missed." I looked at her, really looked. She seemed smaller, her hair streaked with more gray. For the first time, I saw not just my mom, but a woman who had made a lot of mistakes and was, maybe, trying to own them. I said, "I'm glad you're here now." It wasn't full forgiveness, but it was a step toward something better than the invisible life I'd had before. Since that visit, things have not been perfect. They still forget sometimes. My mom will still go on long tangents about Hannah's job. My dad still slides into old habits, assuming I'm fine without checking. But now, I stop them. When my mom talks for 10 minutes about Hannah, I gently say, "Do you want to hear what I've been up to too?" When my dad says, "You're strong, you'll figure it out," I reply, "Being strong doesn't mean I don't need support." The difference is, they listen now. Not always gracefully, not always without defensiveness, but they try. I kept my promise to myself about the bill. I never brought up the actual $14,000 again as something they owed. That wasn't the point anymore. The point was that they had finally seen the bill. They had seen the cost of forgetting one of their children while pouring everything into the other, and they couldn't unsee it. Hannah never got her condo saver donation from me. She adjusted. She moved to a smaller apartment, sold her fancy car, cut back on things she used to think were essential. She resented it at first, but over time, she started bragging about paying off debt. "I'm almost free of my credit cards," she texted me one day. "Feels good, actually," I replied, "Proud of you," and meant it. At work, I kept growing. I took on bigger projects, mentored new analysts, and started drawing again seriously. I even sold a few pieces at a local art fair. When my parents saw a photo of my booth, my mom commented publicly, "So proud of our talented daughter in Denver," and tagged me. It was a small online thing, but younger me would have cried seeing that. Maybe the biggest change, though, was inside me. I stopped chasing the version of my family that only existed in my head. I stopped waiting for big speeches and over-the-top apologies. Instead, I focused on building a life where I was seen, valued, and stable, with or without their approval. My condo became more than a place to sleep. It was my proof that I could take all the neglect, all the second-place moments, and still create something solid under my own feet. If you've listened to my story all the way to this point, there's a good chance you see yourself in some part of it. Maybe you're the second child who got the leftovers of attention. Maybe you're the responsible one your family leans on, not because they respect you, but because they know you'll pick up the pieces without complaining. Maybe you moved away, got promoted, built something amazing, and no one back home even noticed until they realized what you had to offer them. If that's you, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not selfish for setting boundaries. You are not cruel for refusing to burn down your own stability to keep other people comfortable. You are not ungrateful for asking your family to see you as more than the strong, quiet one who always manages. Sending that bill to my parents was not about the money. It was about finally standing up and saying, I exist, I remember, and I won't be treated like a backup plan anymore. At first, it blew everything up. There were tears, accusations, and a lot of uncomfortable silence. But on the other side of that fire, what remained was real. Not perfect, not easy, but honest. My parents still have their habits. They still slip. But they know now that if they go back to seeing me as invisible, I will walk away. Not in anger, but in self-respect. And honestly, that changes everything. So if you're listening to this, and you've ever been the forgotten one, the background character in your own family story, I want you to do something. Not a spreadsheet, unless you want to. I'm an accountant. I do spreadsheets for fun. I want you to make a list of what it has cost you to be the easy child. The times you swallowed your feelings, the milestones nobody showed up for, the nights you comforted yourself because nobody else did. Look at that list and understand. You are allowed to draw a line now. You are allowed to say, no more. You don't owe anyone your home, your savings, or your peace to earn a love that should have been given freely in the first place. And if this story hit you in a place you don't usually let people see, I want you to prove to yourself you're not invisible, at least not here. Drop a comment with one word, seen. Because you are. And if you want more stories like this, more voices from people who finally stopped playing the background in their own lives, you know what to do. Hit like, hit subscribe, and stick around. We have a lot more to talk about.